The night my sister stood on stage reading the scholarship speech, my dead mother wrote for me. I did not cry. I sat in the back row of the university auditorium with my hands folded in my lap, watching my parents clap for the wrong daughter, and I kept one sealed envelope inside my coat like a heartbeat. My name is Maren Ellis. I was 24 years old when my family tried to steal the last gift my mother left me. Not jewelry, not money. Not even the little house she and I had lived in after my father moved us out of the bigger one so his favorite daughter could have stability. What they stole was worse because it had my mother's voice in it. They stole her words. And they thought words were easy to move from one person to another. Change a name, retype a paragraph, smile under stage lights, let donors clap, let cameras flash, let the quiet daughter sit where quiet daughters are expected to sit, in the dark, grateful for crumbs and too trained to make a scene. But my mother had known them longer than I had. She had known my father's weakness, my sister's hunger, and my own habit of swallowing pain until it looked like grace. So before she died, she made one final arrangement none of them knew about. That arrangement was sitting in the university president's folder. And when he opened it, my sister stopped smiling. If you have ever been erased by the people who used your sacrifice, this story is for you. Stay with me until the end, because the part everyone remembers is the stage. But the part that saved me started months before, beside a hospital bed, when my mother held my hand and said, "Do not let them turn your goodness into their ladder." I grew up in a family where love had a seating chart. My father, Harold Ellis, believed every person had a role, and once he assigned yours, you were expected to perform it without complaint. My older brother, Colin, was the future of the family because he carried the last name and could shake hands like a politician. My younger sister, Brielle, was the miracle because she was beautiful in the way people notice first and question later. I was the dependable one. Dependable sounds kind when you are young. Teachers said it with approval. Neighbors said it when they needed babysitting. My father said it when there was work to do and no one else wanted the inconvenience. Maren is dependable, he would say. She does not need fussing over. By 10, I was packing lunches. By 12, I was handling grocery lists when my mother's migraines started. By 14, I knew how to pay the electricity bill online because my father forgot twice and blamed the company both times. Brielle, 3 years younger, was never asked to learn any of that. She was delicate. She was artistic. She was meant for bigger rooms, my father said. I did not know then that some parents call one child strong so they can stop protecting her. My mother knew. Her name was Elena, and she had been a high school literature teacher before illness made her world smaller. She loved books, fountain pens, and the exact blue of morning before sunrise. She saw more than she said. When my father praised Brielle for being special and praised me for being useful, my mother's eyes would flick toward me, apologetic and fierce. At night, when the house finally stopped asking things of me, she would sit on the edge of my bed and read poems softly. Sometimes she would stop halfway through a line and say, "Maren, remember this. People will call you selfish the first time you stop being available to them." I would roll my eyes because I was young and still thought love was something you could earn by never needing anything. She would tap my notebook. "Write anyway," she said. "A woman who keeps a record keeps a door open." I wanted to become a teacher because of her. Not because teaching looked easy. I knew better. I had watched my mother grade essays until midnight, call parents who did not answer, buy classroom snacks with money she should have spent on herself, and come home exhausted but alive with purpose. She believed a classroom could be the first safe place a child ever entered, then she got sick. At first it was fatigue, then bruises, then appointments, then words no family wants to learn. Aggressive lymphoma, treatment protocol, complications, remission, relapse. My father became excellent at public grief. He drove her to the first 3 chemotherapy appointments, posted a tasteful photo online with a caption about strength, and accepted casseroles at the door like a man carrying a noble burden. Then the attention faded, and so did he. By my second year of college, I was commuting from campus to the oncology center 3 times a week. I scheduled her medications, translated insurance letters, argued with billing departments, and sat beside her during infusions while Brielle posted photos from campus events with captions about being inspired by strong women. My father told people Brielle was struggling emotionally with mom's illness and needed space. He told people I was handling things well. Handling things well meant sleeping 4 hours a night. It meant studying in hospital cafeterias. It meant missing group projects, then doing the work alone so nobody would know. It meant bringing my mother lemon ice when nothing else stayed down. It meant holding a basin while the woman who once taught me Shakespeare apologized for vomiting. "Do not apologize to me," I would say. She would close her eyes. "I hate that you know how to do this. I want to." "No," she said one night, voice thin but clear. "You love me. That is not the same as wanting to be used by everyone around me." I did not answer because she was right, and because truth is hard to accept when you still hope the people hurting you will one day notice and stop. The scholarship entered our lives in my mother's final winter. It was called the Whitcomb Future Educators Award, a full graduate scholarship at Ashford University for students entering education, counseling, or public service. My mother had once taught at a summer program funded by the Whitcomb Foundation, and the award mattered to her more than I expected. "You should apply," she told me from the recliner where she had started spending most afternoons. "I am not sure I can," I said. "The application wants a personal statement, references, service history. I barely have time to breathe. That is why you should apply." I laughed softly. "That makes no sense." "It makes perfect sense. You have given years of service without a title for it. You need a future that is not just recovery from everyone else's emergency." Brielle overheard part of that conversation from the kitchen. She came in holding a mug she had not washed and said, "Is that the big scholarship with the donor gala?" My mother's face changed slightly. "It is an education scholarship." Brielle smiled. "I am thinking about switching into nonprofit leadership. That counts, right?" My stomach tightened. Brielle had switched majors 3 times. Her latest interest in nonprofit leadership had begun after she realized donors liked photographs of attractive young women beside children. My father encouraged it. He said she had presence. He said people wanted to support a face they could believe in. My mother said, "The award is based on sustained service." Brielle looked at me, then back at Mom. "Well, some people serve quietly, and some people are meant to inspire publicly." I remember that sentence because it was the first time I understood she did not just want opportunities. She wanted mine to look smaller. My mother waited until Brielle left. Then she reached for my hand. "Promise me you will apply." "I promise." She squeezed my fingers with the little strength she had left. "Good, because I am writing your recommendation letter." She wrote slowly. It took her 11 days to finish the 2 pages. Her hands shook. Sometimes she could only write a sentence before needing to sleep. She refused to dictate it to me, even when I offered. "You cannot be trusted not to edit out the praise," she said. I smiled, but she was not joking. On the 12th day, she placed the finished letter in a cream envelope and wrote my name on the front, "For Marin, when she is ready to be seen." I tried to take it, but she held it back. "There are 3 copies," she said. 3, 1 for you. 1 for the application. 1 somewhere safe. Safe from what? Her eyes moved toward the hallway, toward the room where my father was watching television too loudly, and Brielle was laughing into her phone. "From people who confuse your kindness with vacancy." I wanted to tell her she was being dramatic. I wanted to defend them because daughters are strange creatures. We will defend the people who disappoint us just to keep the shape of family intact. But my mother's face was too serious. "Listen to me, Marin. Your father loves an easy story. Brielle loves a bright room. They will not always see the line between borrowing and taking. They would not steal a letter from you." My mother looked at me for a long time. "Sweetheart," she said, "they have been stealing your labor for years. A letter is lighter." Those words stayed with me. A letter is lighter. I did not know she had already asked her former department chair, Dr. Miriam Vale, to hold the 3rd copy. I did not know she had written a separate note and sealed it with instructions. If my daughter is ever erased, read this aloud. I only knew that 3 weeks later, my mother was gone. Grief did not arrive like a wave. It arrived like paperwork, death certificate, funeral home, insurance forms, medication disposal. Thank you cards for flowers I did not remember receiving. My father moved through the house with the stunned irritation of a man who expected grief to be sad, but not administratively inconvenient. Brielle cried beautifully at the funeral. She wore black silk and stood near the front while people told her she looked just like Mom when she was young. I stood by the guest book and made sure the pens worked. After the burial, relatives gathered at our house. Someone asked my father how I was doing, and he said, "Maren is holding up. She is practical." Practical. The word landed like a slap. Brielle gave a speech in the living room about how our mother had taught her to chase meaning. She mentioned late-night talks they had never had, lessons Mom had never given her, and a shared dream of helping young people find their voices. People cried. My father put his arm around her. I stood in the kitchen with a tray of coffee cups and realized grief could be stolen too. Not entirely, maybe. But people could take the public shape of it, the language of it, the applause for having loved someone deeply, while the person who had actually changed sheets, counted pills, and held the basin disappeared into the background. That night, after everyone left, I went to my mother's desk for the envelope. It was gone. At first, I thought I had misplaced it. I checked drawers, folders, bookshelves, the old recipe box where she kept stamps. Nothing. The cream envelope with my name on it had vanished, I asked my father. He barely looked up. Your mother had many papers. Maybe you threw it away during cleaning. I did not. Maren, do not start. We are all grieving. Then Brielle came downstairs wearing my mother's cardigan and said, "Maybe Mom changed her mind." Something in her voice made me go still. Changed her mind about what? I asked. Brielle smiled too quickly. Whatever you are looking for. That was the first receipt, not a document, not proof, just tone. But I had learned from my mother that tone is where truth often leaks before evidence catches up. I applied anyway. I wrote my personal statement in the public library because I could not breathe in our house anymore. I wrote about my mother's classroom, about caring for her through illness, about why I wanted to create learning spaces where quiet students were not mistaken for empty ones. I wrote about the difference between being helpful and being seen. I submitted the application without the recommendation letter because the portal allowed supplementary materials later. I told no one. 2 weeks after the deadline, Brielle announced at dinner that she had applied too. For the Whitcomb Award? I asked. She lifted her chin. Yes, you are not in education. I am applying under community leadership. The foundation supports public service. My father beamed. Your sister has a gift for connecting with people. I looked at Brielle. What did you write about? Her fork paused halfway to her mouth. Mom. The room narrowed. What about Mom? Her eyes cooled. Our relationship, what she taught me, how caring for her changed my view of service. I heard my pulse. You cared for her? My father set down his glass. Do not be petty. Petty. There it was. The word families use when a servant objects to being robbed. Brielle's voice softened into performance. Maren, I know you did a lot of tasks. But emotional caretaking matters too. Trisix, I had tasks. She had meaning. I looked at my father, waiting for one honest sentence. He rubbed his temple. Your mother belonged to all of us. I stood so quickly my chair scraped the floor. Her illness belonged mostly to me. Brielle's face hardened. That is exactly why people prefer my version. You make everything sound bitter. I left the table. Behind me, my father said, "Let her go. She has always struggled with generosity." That night, I moved the few documents I still had into a folder under my bed. My mother's warning echoed in my head. A letter is lighter. The first clue came from an email addressed to Brielle, but accidentally sent to the shared family printer. I had stopped using that printer months earlier, but it was still connected to my laptop from college. A notification appeared while I was writing lesson plans for my part-time tutoring job. Printing complete. I walked to the den and found one page sitting in the tray. It was from the Whitcomb Foundation. Dear Ms. Ellis, congratulations on being selected as a finalist. Brielle was a finalist. I read the page twice, then noticed the line at the bottom. Please prepare to read a brief excerpt from the recommendation letter submitted on your behalf during the awards ceremony. The recommendation letter. My hands went cold. I photographed the page, put it back exactly as I found it, and walked out of the room before anyone saw my face. For 3 days, I said nothing. I watched Brielle grow brighter. She bought a cream dress for the ceremony. My father ordered new cufflinks. They spoke about the gala as if the award had already been won. When I asked whether I had heard from the foundation, my father said gently, Marin, not everything is your season. I almost believed him for 1 second because old training is powerful. Then I remembered my mother writing through shaking hands. On the 4th day, I received my own email. I was also a finalist. I sat on the curb outside the tutoring center and laughed. Not because it was funny. Because for the first time since my mother died, the universe had put both versions of the story in the same room and asked them to stand under lights. The ceremony was scheduled for May 18th in Ashford University's old auditorium, the one with stained glass windows and a balcony shaped like a horseshoe. Finalists were allowed to bring family. I did not invite mine. They assumed I had not been chosen and I let them. Instead, I emailed Dr. Miriam Vale. I had only met her twice, both times when my mother was still teaching. She was the kind of woman who wore silver-rimmed glasses and could silence a room by lowering her voice. My email was careful. I told her my mother had mentioned a 3rd copy of a recommendation letter. I said the original copy left for me had disappeared. I said my sister appeared to have submitted a recommendation letter connected to our mother. Dr. Vale called me 20 minutes later. "Marin," she said, "come to my office tomorrow morning." No greeting, no soft sympathy. Just instruction. When I arrived, she closed the door, set a box of tissues on the table without comment, and opened a locked file drawer. She removed a cream envelope. My name was on it in my mother's handwriting. For Marin, if she is ever erased. My whole body went quiet. Dr. Vale did not hand it to me immediately. "Your mother gave this to me 6 weeks before she died. She told me not to open it unless there was a problem with the scholarship process. She knew, she suspected. Elena was a gentle woman, not a naive one. The tears came then. I hated that they did." Dr. Vale waited. When I could speak, I asked, "What does it say?" She opened the envelope and read silently first. Her mouth tightened. Then she handed me the pages. The first was the recommendation letter. It began, "I am writing for my daughter, Marin Ellis, who has spent years doing the invisible work that families often call natural, because they do not want to name it sacrifice." The second was a note addressed to the Whitcomb Committee. "If this letter is ever submitted under any name other than Marin Ellis, it has been stolen." I sat there holding my mother's proof, while the office clock ticked loudly enough to sound like footsteps. Dr. Vale contacted the foundation that afternoon, not with accusations, with documentation. She sent a scanned copy of the sealed letter, a photograph of the envelope, a statement confirming chain of custody, and a request that the committee verify the submitted materials before the ceremony. The foundation president, Malcolm Avery, replied within 2 hours. He wanted to meet me privately before the gala. Malcolm Avery was not what I expected. I thought foundation presidents looked polished and distant. He was in his late 60s, with kind eyes, an old tweed jacket, and the weary calm of a man who had seen money make people behave badly in too many creative ways. He met me in a conference room at Ashford and placed 2 folders on the table. One had my name, one had Brielle's. "I cannot show you your sister's full file," he said, "but I can tell you this. A letter submitted in support of her application contains paragraphs that match the letter Dr. Vale provided. The name was changed. Several sentences were edited. The central claims remain." I stared at the folder. She used it? Yes. My mother's handwriting? No. A typed version was submitted with an electronic certification from your father, stating it reflected Elena Ellis's final recommendation. Of course, my father. The man who loved easy stories had signed the lie because the lie made his chosen daughter shine. "What happens now?" I asked. Moore Avery folded his hands. "There is a process. We can quietly disqualify her before the ceremony, or, because finalists have already been announced and donors are attending, we can ask clarifying questions publicly if she chooses to read from the letter. Why would you let her go on stage?" "Because sometimes private correction protects the institution more than the truth." He said it with distaste, not approval. I thought of my mother's note. "If my daughter is ever erased, read this aloud." "She will read it," I said. "She loves a stage." Mr. Avery looked at me for a long time. "And if she does, then read the original." His eyes softened. "Are you sure?" "No." I was not sure. I was terrified. But certainty is not the same as courage. Sometimes courage is simply being more loyal to the dead than you are afraid of the living. "Yes," I said. My mother asked for that. The week before the ceremony, my family became unbearable with victory. Brielle rehearsed in the living room while my father timed her pauses. My mother believed service was love made visible. Brielle read, one hand over her heart. I froze in the hallway. That was my mother's sentence. I knew it because I had watched her write it, stop, cross out visible, then write it again. My father said, beautiful. Slow down before love made visible. Let them feel it. Let them feel it. As if feeling could be staged from theft. Brielle looked up and saw me. Oh, she said, I didn't know you were home. I live here. For now, she said softly, there it was. The punishment waiting behind the award. Once she won, once my father had proof that she was the daughter worth investing in, I would be expected to leave the house. I was already sleeping in the smallest bedroom. My mother's desk had been moved into Brielle's study. My father called it making space for the future. I walked into the living room. Where did you get that sentence? Brielle blinked. What sentence? My mother believed service was love made visible. My father stepped between us. Your mother said many things. To me, his voice turned cold. Do not embarrass yourself, Marin. I looked at Brielle. Did you read the whole letter? Her face shifted. Not guilt exactly. Fear dressed as irritation. Mom wanted me to have a chance. No, I said. Mom wanted me to have the truth. My father's hand came down on the back of a chair. Enough. It was a familiar sound. The house closing ranks, the dependable daughter being reminded of her place. But this time, my place was not theirs to assign. On the day of the ceremony, I dressed in navy because my mother once told me navy made me look like a person people should trust with keys. I pinned her small silver brooch to my lapel. It was shaped like an open book. Brielle wore cream. My father wore his best suit. Colin arrived late, smelled like expensive cologne, and asked if there would be donors with business connections. My family drove together. I drove separately. In my passenger seat was the cream envelope from Dr. Vale and a copy of every email, photograph, and statement I had gathered. I had learned from my mother and from years of being called dramatic that proof is a kindness you give yourself before entering a room full of liars. The auditorium was full when I arrived. Gold program booklets, white flowers, faculty in dark suits, donners murmuring over name tags, a student string quartet playing something gentle enough to make theft look elegant. My father saw me near the back and frowned. What are you doing here? I was invited. Brielle's eyes widened slightly. Then she smiled too brightly. As a guest, as a finalist. For 1 second, nobody spoke. Colin laughed, awkward. My father recovered first. Marin, this is not the time for resentment. I agree. He leaned close. Do not ruin this for your sister. That sentence almost made me smile. After everything, he still thought the danger was my honesty, not their lie. I took a seat in the back row. Dr. Vale sat 2 chairs away from me. She did not look at my family. She simply touched the folder in her lap once, a quiet signal. The ceremony began. 3 finalists spoke before Brielle, a young man who had built a literacy program in a rural county, a woman who had started a grief group after losing her brother, a first-generation college student who taught English at night to immigrant parents. Their stories were real, and you could hear it in the details. Real service has texture. It names inconvenient hours, unpaid work, mistakes, fatigue, ordinary moments no one would invent for applause. Then Mr. Avery introduced Brielle. Our next finalist, Brielle Ellis, writes about a mother's legacy of service and the call to carry that legacy into public leadership. Brielle walked to the podium as if she had been born in the spotlight. Cameras lifted. My father straightened. My brother leaned back, already bored now that no one was discussing him. I looked at my hands and felt my mother's brooch against my chest. Brielle began. My mother, Elena Ellis, taught me that service is love made visible. There it was. The sentence left her mouth and entered the room wearing stolen clothes. She continued. She read about sitting beside Mom through chemotherapy, about learning patience from medication schedules, about translating fear into hope, about a daughter who had given up sleep and comfort to protect a mother's dignity. She read my life in her voice. She took my exhaustion, my tenderness, my private jokes with Mom, and turned them into a performance smooth enough to win a room. People nodded. A woman in the front row wiped her eyes. My father looked proud. I gripped the edge of my chair until my fingers hurt. Dr. Vale leaned slightly toward me and whispered, "Breathe." So I breathed. Not because I was calm, Because my mother had not survived long enough to watch me collapse before the truth got its turn, Brielle finished to strong applause. She lowered her eyes modestly, exactly as my father had coached. Then Mr. Avery returned to the podium. "Thank you, Miss Ellis," he said. Something in his tone changed the temperature of the room. "Before we proceed, the Foundation has a tradition. When a finalist reads from a family letter, and when the original author is no longer living, we sometimes invite a confirming witness to honor the author's full words." Brielle's smile faltered. My father stood halfway from his chair. "What is this?" Mr. Avery did not look at him. "Dr. Miriam Vale, would you join me?" The auditorium murmured. Dr. Vale rose beside me, folder in hand, and walked to the stage with the calm of a woman carrying a scalpel. Brielle stepped back from the podium. Mr. Avery said, "Doctor." Vale served with Elena Ellis for 14 years in the Ashford Summer Teaching Program. Before her death, Elena entrusted Dr. Vale with a sealed letter and specific instructions regarding this award. My father was standing fully now. "This is inappropriate." Mr. Avery looked at him at last. "Please sit down, Mr. Ellis." He did not. Security moved closer. My father sat. Dr. Vale opened the folder. Elena asked that this be read only if her words were submitted under the wrong name. The room went silent in a way I had never heard before. Not polite silence, hungry silence. The kind that knows a mask is about to fall. Dr. Vale read the first line. "I am writing for my daughter, Maren Ellis." Brielle made a sound so small I almost missed it. My father closed his eyes. And somewhere inside me, something that had been bent for years began to straighten. Dr. Vale read slowly. My mother's letter filled the auditorium, and this time it wore the right name. "I am writing for my daughter, Maren Ellis, who has spent years doing the invisible work that families often call natural because they do not want to name it sacrifice." She read about the medication charts I made. The insurance calls, the nights in the hospital, recliner. The assignments completed beside infusion pumps. The way I tucked warmed blankets around my mother's feet because chemotherapy made her cold. She read the sentence Brielle had stolen, and the sentences Brielle had cut because they made the truth impossible to move. Maren has learned service not as performance, but as fidelity. She does not enter a room asking where the light is. She notices who has been left in the dark. I heard people turn to look at me. I did not look back. My eyes were on the stage, on Dr. Vale's hands holding my mother's paper. Then Dr. Vale read the final paragraph. "If this letter is ever submitted under any name other than Maren's, then someone has mistaken my daughter's quiet for consent. I know my family. I know how easily they praise the visible child and spend the invisible one. I am asking this committee as my final act as a teacher and mother to see the daughter who stayed." That was where the room broke, not loudly, a collective inhale, a donor whispering, "Oh my God," a program booklet slipping to the floor. Brielle was crying now. Not stage tears, real ones, hot and frightened. My father turned toward me with rage in his face, because exposure feels like violence to people who depend on silence. I did not move. Mr. Avery returned to the microphone. "The Foundation has verified that portions of Elena Ellis's original letter were submitted in altered form in support of another application. The matter is under review. The award decision will be amended accordingly." My father shouted, "You cannot do this publicly." Mr. Avery's voice remained level. "Your daughter did this publicly when she read the altered letter from this stage." That sentence landed harder than any accusation. Brielle stepped toward the microphone. "I did not know all of it." Dr. Vale looked at her. "You knew the name at the top was not yours." Brielle covered her mouth. A staff member guided her away from the podium. Colin had gone pale, probably calculating whether anyone with business connections had noticed. My father started toward the aisle. Security intercepted him gently but firmly. My family, who had spent my life controlling rooms through tone, status, and certainty, had suddenly become ordinary people causing a scene. Mr. Avery looked toward the back row. "Maren Ellis," he said, "would you please join us?" Every muscle in my body refused. Dr. Vale's eyes found mine. She gave one nod. I stood. The walk to the stage felt longer than my mother's illness. Longer than every night on hospital vinyl chairs. Longer than every dinner where I served plates to people who later called my work resentment. I climbed the steps, aware of the entire room watching, and stood beside the podium where my sister had just worn my life like a dress. Mr. Avery handed me the original letter. "This belongs to you," he said. I took it with both hands. Then he said, "Would you like to say anything?" I had not planned to speak. That was the truth. I had planned only to let my mother's words do what mine had never been allowed to do. But when I looked out and saw Brielle in the side aisle, my father behind security, and strangers looking at me with something like respect, I realized silence had served its purpose. I leaned toward the microphone. "My mother taught English," I said, "so she would want me to be precise. This was not a misunderstanding. It was not sibling rivalry. It was not grief. It was theft. Not only from me, but from the person she was when she wrote this letter." The room stayed silent. I loved my mother in private rooms. I did not know there would ever be public proof. But she did, so I am not here to take revenge. I am here to return her words to their correct address. My voice shook on the last word. I let it. Then I stepped back. The ceremony did not continue normally. How could it? Mr. Avery announced a short recess. People stood, whispered, stared. I walked off stage with Dr. Vale beside me, and we entered a small green room behind the auditorium. The door had barely closed before my father pushed through it. "You have humiliated this family," he said. There was no "are you okay?" no apology. No moment of astonishment that my dead mother had predicted his dishonesty so accurately she had built a safety mechanism from beyond the grave. Only humiliation. Dr. Vale stepped between us. "Harold, leave." He ignored her. "Marin, you will fix this. You will tell them you gave permission." I looked at him for a long time. "Dad," I said, "Mom said if her letter was submitted under another name, it was stolen. She was sick. She was clear. She was angry." She was right. That stopped him. Not because he agreed. Because he was unused to hearing me speak without leaving him a bridge. Brielle entered behind him, face streaked, mascara under her eyes. "I'm sorry," she said. I wanted to believe her. A lifetime of older sister reflex rose in me. Comfort her, explain for her, rescue the room from the consequences of her choices. Then I looked at the letter in my hands. "What are you sorry for?" I asked. She blinked. "For everything." "That is not an answer." Her mouth trembled. "For using it. How did you get it?" She looked at our father. There it was. My father said nothing. Brielle whispered. "Dad found the envelope after the funeral. He said Mom would have wanted the family to have the best chance. He said you were too tired to apply properly anyway." My father's face hardened. "I was trying to protect a future." "Whose?" I asked. No one answered. Mr. Avery entered with 2 members of the foundation board. His face was grave, but not unkind. "Mrs. Brielle Ellis," he said, "pending formal review, your finalist status is revoked. You will not receive the award. We will document the altered submission." Brielle began crying again. My father moved toward her, then stopped when a board member raised a hand. Mr. Avery turned to me. "Marin, the board has reviewed your file, Dr. Vale's documentation, and your mother's original recommendation. We are prepared to name you the Whitcomb Future Educator Scholar, provided you are comfortable accepting under these circumstances." Under these circumstances. As if circumstances had not been my entire life. I looked at Dr. Vale. She said nothing. Good mentors do not choose for you. They stand close enough that you remember you can choose. I thought of my mother writing with shaking hands. I thought of the note, "See the daughter who stayed." I thought of all the times I had refused good things because accepting them would make someone else uncomfortable. "Yes," I said, "I accept." My father made a low sound. "Marin." I looked at him. "Do not ask me to hand it back." He looked older then, not softer, just smaller without authority working. Brielle sank into a chair. "What am I supposed to do now?" It was the first honest question she had asked all night. I said, "Write something true." She stared at me as if truth were a language she had heard, but never had to speak. Maybe it was. The official announcement happened 20 minutes later. Mr. Avery returned to the stage and said the foundation had identified a documentation concern and would amend the award. He did not describe every detail. He did not need to. Everyone had heard enough. When he said my name, the applause began slowly, then grew. I stood from the front row this time because Dr. Vale had moved me there during the recess. Front row. The idea almost made me laugh. For years, I had lived in the back of my own life because other people were more comfortable there. I walked to the stage again. Mr. Avery handed me a certificate and a small glass plaque. But the real award was still the letter, folded carefully inside its envelope. The scholarship covered tuition, housing support, and a teaching fellowship. It meant I could leave my father's house. It meant I could stop choosing between groceries and application fees. It meant my future no longer depended on the people who had mistaken my endurance for permission. When I faced the room, I did not give a polished speech. I said, "Thank you for believing documentation when emotion made it difficult. Thank you for honoring my mother's full words, and thank you for understanding that invisible service is still service." Then I looked at the camera recording the ceremony for the Foundation archive. "Mom," I said, "they read it." That was all I could manage. Afterward, 3 women I had never met hugged me in the lobby. One said her sister had taken credit for caring for their father. Another said her family had used her essays for a younger cousin. A third pressed my hand and said, "I was the invisible daughter too." That is the thing about truth. Once spoken clearly, it gives strangers permission to stop pretending their own pain was small. The fallout at home was immediate. My father did not speak to me for 3 days, which would have hurt more if silence had not been his main language with me already. Brielle posted nothing online for the first time in her adult life. Colin sent one text. That was intense. "You good?" It was the closest he had ever come to brotherly concern. I did not answer. The foundation completed its review in 2 weeks. Brielle's application was formally disqualified for misrepresentation. Because no funds had been released, there were no legal charges. My father was banned from submitting family certifications for any future foundation process. Dr. Vale told me the board added a new policy requiring original recommender verification when applicants used posthumous family letters. My mother's last act became a rule that could protect someone else. That mattered to me. Moving out was less dramatic than I expected. I packed 2 suitcases, 3 boxes of books, my mother's fountain pen, and the brooch. My father watched from the doorway. "You are really leaving over this?" he asked. "Over this." I looked around the bedroom I had returned to after hospital nights, the room where I had cried into pillows so no one would accuse me of making grief harder for them. "No," I said. "I am leaving because this is only the part that got witnesses." He looked away. Brielle came to the hallway but did not speak. For a moment, I saw her not as a villain, but as someone raised to feed on light, because our father kept handing it to her. That did not excuse her. It only made the damage sadder. At the door, she whispered, "I don't know who I am without everyone watching," I said. "Then maybe start there." Then I left. Ashford gave me a small graduate apartment with thin walls, old radiators, and a view of the library roof. It was not beautiful, but the first night I slept there, I woke at 2:09 a.m. and realized no one in the apartment expected me to fix anything. That quiet felt almost frightening. I placed my mother's letter on the desk beneath a lamp. For weeks, I read it every morning before class. Not the whole thing, just one sentence. She notices who has been left in the dark. I carried that sentence into my teaching fellowship. My first placement was in a middle school reading lab with students who had already learned to apologize for needing help. I recognized them instantly. The girl who did every group project alone. The boy who made jokes before anyone could call him slow. The child who translated emails for parents and called it normal. Invisible children glow differently when you know how to look. I built my classroom around the rule I wished someone had built for me. No one disappears because they are useful. When a student named Jada stayed after class to stack chairs without being asked, I thanked her and then asked, "Who stacks chairs for you?" She looked confused. "Think about it," I said. "People who help also deserve help." She stared at me for a long time. Then she nodded slowly. That day, I understood the scholarship had not just given me tuition. It had returned my mother's work to the world through me. My father called in October. I almost did not answer. When I did, he sounded tired. "I found something," he said. "What?" "Your mother's journal from the last month." My chest tightened. "Do not read it to me." I already read enough to know I should not have. That was the most self-aware sentence he had ever spoken to me. He mailed it. No note. Just the journal wrapped in brown paper. I let it sit on my desk for 2 days before opening it. My mother's handwriting changed across the pages, strong at first, then smaller, then uneven. She wrote about pain, about fear, about missing her students, about me. Marin thinks love means staying until everyone else is comfortable. I have taught many children, But I failed to teach my own daughter that her life is not extra credit for this family. I read that sentence until the page blurred. Near the end, she wrote about Brielle. Brielle has learned performance because Harold rewards it. I worry she will confuse being admired with being known. And about my father. Harold loves the daughter who makes him feel successful and depends on the daughter who makes his life function. He does not see the cruelty in needing one and praising the other. It was all there. The whole house, diagnosed by a dying teacher with clearer vision than any healthy person in it. The last entry said, "If Marin reads this, I hope she is somewhere with a door that locks from the inside." I was. I pressed my palm to the page and whispered, "I am." Brielle wrote to me in December. A real letter, not a text. Her handwriting was round and careful, like she had slowed herself down on purpose. She said she had started therapy. She said the foundation scandal had cost her admission to a nonprofit leadership program. She said she hated me for a while, then hated our father, then hated herself, and none of it fixed anything. She said she had read Mom's public letter transcript. So many times she finally noticed the parts that had never been about her. Then she wrote, "I do not know if I miss you, or if I miss the person who used to absorb the consequences for me. I am trying to find out before I ask for anything." That sentence was the first one from her I respected. I did not write back immediately. Growth in someone else does not create an emergency for you. It does not demand instant access. I put the letter in a drawer and let myself feel both grief and relief. A month later, I replied with 3 sentences. "I am glad you are trying to tell the truth. I am not ready for closeness. Keep going, even if I am not your audience." That felt fair. My father sent money once, a cashier's check marked for school. I returned it, not because I did not need money. Graduate students always need money. But some checks arrive with invisible strings, and I was done learning knots with my throat. Dr. Vale told me there is dignity in receiving help from safe hands. So I accepted help from safe hands. The scholarship, a campus pantry, a mentor, a friend who brought soup during exams. I learned that independence did not mean refusing all support. It meant choosing support that did not ask for your silence in exchange. On the 1st anniversary of my mother's death, I visited her grave before sunrise. The cemetery was quiet, the grass silver with frost. I brought blue flowers because she loved morning blue. I brought the original letter, sealed in a protective sleeve, and sat on the cold ground beside her stone. "I was seen," I told her. The sky lightened behind the trees. "I wish it had not taken a stage. I wish you could have said it while alive and been believed without building a trap. I wish I had known sooner that you knew." A bird called somewhere far off. But they read it, and I am teaching, and I have a door that locks from the inside. I laughed then because it sounded like something she would underline in a student essay. Good image, Marin. Strong closing. Watch repetition. Grief softened in that moment, not because it was gone, but because it had room to stand without being stolen. When I left, I did not leave the letter at the grave. My mother had not written it for stone. She had written it for movement. I took it back to my apartment and placed it above my desk. That night, I drafted the first lesson plan for my own future classroom. The title at the top was simple: How to Tell Your Own Story. The first line under it: Start with the part they asked you to leave out. So if you are listening now and you have been the dependable one, the practical one, the strong one, the child who did the work while someone else learned how to describe it beautifully, I need you to hear me clearly. Keep the original. Keep the drafts. Keep the texts. Keep the emails. Keep the receipts, the timestamps, the names of people who saw what happened. Not because life should be lived like a court case, but because people who rewrite reality count on your shame to destroy the evidence. And more than that, keep the part of yourself they tried to make useful but not visible. My sister did not steal my entire life. She stole a letter because she thought my life was the kind of thing people would believe only if it came from her mouth. My father signed the certification because he thought his favorite daughter's future was worth more than my truth. But my mother, sick and tired and almost out of time, wrote one sentence that outlived all of them. If my daughter is ever erased, read this aloud. That is what saved me. Not revenge, not luck, preparation, love with a witness. Truth stored somewhere safe. If this story reached you, like this video and subscribe to She Chose Herself. It helps the next invisible daughter find this before she hands over another piece of herself to people who only clap when someone else is holding it. And tell me in the comments, what is one thing you are taking back? Years later, people still ask what happened to the letter. They expect me to say it is locked in a bank box or framed behind museum glass. It is not. It sits in a plain blue folder in my desk drawer, beside lesson plans and student notes and extra pens. Sometimes I take it out when I forget why I chose this road. Sometimes I do not need it for months. That is how healing works, I think. Proof becomes less like a weapon and more like a foundation. You do not stare at the foundation every day. You live on top of it. Braille and I are not close. We may never be. But last spring, she sent me a photo of a classroom she had started volunteering in. No caption, no explanation, just the image of a chalkboard that read, "Tell the truth, even in pieces." I did not write back right away, but I saved it. I keep the original where no edited copy can replace it. I teach with the lights on, and I choose myself.